Hey guys, thank you for joining us today on our first ever airing of Public Runnings. My name is David Chambers and this is
Professor Lincoln Hammond of the London School of Economics, but now of the United States, recently.
You know, we're glad to have you here in the United States. Thank you for immigrating over. You're going to be a great contribution to our society.
Thank you very much.
Recently in the political news, we've had stories about Hillary Clinton's close friend talking about her secrets and how she'll win at any cost. And then there's the left and the right. They both object to the IRS plan to restrict nonprofits' political activity. But that's not the biggest story of the latest headlines. Let's talk about the national debt and the debt ceiling. Recently, on Tuesday, matter of fact, the debt ceiling was raised. Oh, sorry, not raised. The cap was completely released. So the government is now allowed to borrow at will to pay their bills. Our current debt is at $17,792,658,336.62. And tell me, Mr. Lincoln, what's your take on that? We're at that severe of a debt, and now we're going to take the cap off? What do you think is going to happen here?
Well, the problem with this is governments around the world are generally prone to stupidity. Now, if we look at the history of Congress and where it was founded and how everything that led up to that moment of independence from Great Britain, my own dear country, we can see that the idea of a national debt was always there. The founders themselves realized that in order to fight my kinsmen, they would have to borrow large sums of money to finance this war. And so they did. They went about soliciting credit from such agencies as the French government.
Who can't fight anything anyways.
Which is very true, and the Dutch Republic. And so we've always had a national debt. However, the different amount of debt we've had throughout the ages has reflected the trend of one Congress and the next.
Now, how much of that debt is actually more borrowing and just a sheer amount of inflation?
Well, it completely depends. See, in the 1970s, we suffered from stagflation, as you may have remembered. You know, gas lines and all that. Yes, it was
President Carter.
Carter was an imbecile. The Brits were laughing about it. Unfortunately, I just moved here, and so I had to call him my own. Anyway, so the problem with the debt and taking the cap off of this is that Congress is inclined to borrow as much money as it wills. There is no limit anymore. So instead of having this crisis of we are racking up large bills to our foreign creditors, now they can borrow as much with...
Let me jump in on that. You know, is the government setting a precedented tone for the people of America to live by just by saying, oh, I can just get more credit cards and rack up more debt and never be able to pay it off, to which their kids is going to have to pay it off? Which makes us look, how is that going to affect generations now and generations for the future?
Right. Well, the problem with this is that Congress never has really set a very good moral code in the beginning. But this also just shows the general decline of morals in America, which is a completely different discussion. However, it does play into this. Congress needs to learn responsibility. They need to learn that they are leading a generation into the hands of decimation. Here we are, at the will of China, at the will of Japan, at the will of all these foreign nations that could at any time ask for their money, leaving us in great peril nationally.
How much longer do you think it is before Chinese becomes the business language and English gets kicked out?
Well, now, that is a hypothetical, but I do believe that we will see in the next 10 to 20 years the decline of America as a business giant and the coming dominance of the Chinese dragon, specified by the yen, and the growing concern is that the dollar will completely give away here shortly.
Now, if America, dies out as being this great superpower because we just can't afford it anymore to support our military, we're owing all the money to the Chinese, how much should we fear the Chinese government stepping in and going to be a huge world power?
Yes, and that is a problem that we should be wary of. You see, the problem is China is not completely out of communism. They have almost perfected their system of totalitarian government so that they can control the people with communist, ruthless tactics, and yet maintain gold in their coffers by introducing a limited amount of capitalism. They've really perfected the system of dominating humankind. And so we need to really be careful when we start waging economic warfare against them.
And not only have they not totally come out of communism, they kept just enough of it to be able to control the people, like you said, but they've gotten rid of enough of it that a lot of the other societies aren't realizing it. And so they're not as afraid of it as they should be.
Yes, and that's, as we watch in the next 10 to 20 years, like I was talking about, you will see the growing power of China as the yen dominates the dollar, and the dollar is completely worthless. It's happened in many countries before, and it will continue happening. It's a continual process of economic revitalization through decomposition.
So all of this can, not necessarily will, but definitely can stem from the government releasing this cap. Counting this cap is only for 13 months. It's going to, the ceiling will be reinstituted come March of 2015.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But at that point, who's going to say that the next round of congressmen aren't going to vote to raise the cap again, completely release it, or whatnot?
Right.
How detrimental is it that we start paying our debts back and stop borrowing money?
Well, at this point, the United States has such rampant debt problems, such a rampant spending crisis, actually, is what it is that the people in Congress, they know that they can just continue racking up bills. And so what needs to happen to remedy this is their constituents, the good people of America, need to stand up, phone their congressmen, and tell them exactly how they feel about racking up debts to foreign nations, because this is a perilous, perilous thing to be doing. It can completely collapse our government if it is not handled properly, and very soon. There are certain projects, including, for example, the own Hanford Project out in Benton County in Washington. And it is a very high-level, important energy product that they are creating there. And so, if they cannot fund that, they cannot fund the adequate men to take care of that, then they will go to what is called men safe. And that is the minimal amount of people that is necessary to operate it.
Which we've already done once this year.
We've already done once this year, exactly. And so what you'll have is this minimal operation of a highly unstable nuclear facility. So what we need to be watching out for is there are certain things that must be funded at all costs to maintain the safety of our citizens and to maintain the security of our borders.
Right. One more question before we leave here. You remember the government shutdown end of last year? Mm-hmm. We went to a minimal government staff. Mm-hmm. What do you feel about the government cutting that staff anyways and saying, let's run the minimal staff so we're not paying the salaries, we can start paying the debts back? If we can operate on a minimal staff, why don't we?
Right. Well, and that is a very good point, actually. And you know, minimal staffing should be something that we look into as we go about making cuts. And that's really what we need to get into, is the crux of the matter is the government is unwilling to make any cuts to their budget because they're worried that they're going to hurt their constituents who keep re-electing them to these positions of power. And so what we need to do is elect men and women of integrity and humility enough that they can make those hard decisions and make those cuts, because those are vital for us to actually get back to a point where we have a manageable budget.